This is Michael Williams. Welcome to the 4 most common reasons people argue. Now, I know some of you are probably thinking things like finances, job, kids, and things like that. But we're actually going to go a little deeper, and we're going to look at some of the underlying reasons why people argue. So let's take a look at that now. Okay, believe it or not, one of the first reasons that people argue a lot is because of habit. Have you ever met someone that if you say up, they're going to say what? Down. If you say left, they're going to say right. No matter what you say, they're going to want to argue with you. And a part of that could be their personality, but a lot of it has to do with maybe how they were raised, the way their parents communicated with each other, the way they communicated with their brothers and sisters, and also how people learn to communicate in relationships, not only growing up, but as they got older. So some people have just developed a habit or a pattern of communication that includes arguing, right? They just want to argue. And so habit is, believe it or not, one of the main reasons that people argue a lot. You just get into that pattern. Now, what I'd like for you to do here is just take a couple of minutes to reflect on these questions. If you like, you can leave your answers here, and only I will see them. And I don't know who you are, but I would love to see your responses, or you can just kind of think about the answers. When you're ready, go ahead and look down to your left and click the little right arrow, and that'll take you to the next slide. Okay, a second reason is unresolved issues. Now, these are events, feelings, or things that someone's done to us in the past that we haven't been able to let go of. That is, we have brought these things forward with us into our current relationship, so they're not resolved. This could also include people that we have not forgiven. So someone's done something to us, and for some reason we don't know how to forgive them, we've tried to forgive them, or we don't want to forgive them, we don't feel like we should, okay? And so we've brought that forward, and what it does is it's impacting, it's eroding, it's affecting your current relationships. What also happens, and perhaps you've met people like this, is it can cause a person to become very angry. Have you ever met someone that's just angry? If you try to hug them, it's like hugging a tree trunk, right? Well, what's happened is that they've had some things that happened to them in the past that they're carrying around with them. And so these issues are unresolved. And it's coming out in their current relationships in the form of arguments. Now, here's another perspective of unresolved issues. This could be something very specific in your current relationship that you haven't been able to resolve. So let's just say your partner doesn't like to take out the trash, so they don't take out the trash, or they don't wash up the dishes, or they leave their dirty drawers in the corner or something, right? So this has been bothering you, and every time you bring it up, you know, they brush you off, or it turns into an argument. So the issue is unresolved. So what happens? It continues to come up over and over and over again, and it causes an argument, right? So what happens is this issue has to be resolved, or else it will continue to come up, or it will cause you and your partner to grow apart. Does this make sense? What might be an example of an issue that continues to come up in your relationship that hasn't been resolved? Maybe it's because you haven't really felt safe to be able to talk about it, or maybe you haven't talked about it. So what's an example of that in your relationship? Okay, a third reason is what we call negative interpretation. Now, this used to be my favorite. Now, what I'd like for you to do first is take a look at this image and tell me what you see. Tell me what you see. Now, I'm not going to tell you what I see, but I want you to tell me what you see. Okay, so what is negative interpretation? It simply means when we take things the wrong way, right? When we interpret something negatively, when we interpret something someone says, something someone does or even something someone doesn't do. We can interpret that negatively. Why might we interpret something negatively? Well, it could have to do with self-esteem. If a person struggles with low self-esteem, and most of us have at some point or another, then this can color how we interpret something. We might think that someone's after us, or that someone's putting us down, or they're saying something bad about us. Health can color how we interpret something. We're not feeling good. We can interpret something more negatively than normal. Previous experiences. This happened to me before, so that's probably what's going on now. Our perspective. We each have our own perspective. That is, you can't be inside someone else's head 100%, right? So we each have our own perspective. We see things from our own way, through our own lenses. Our education, our knowledge, our culture, our nationality, and a whole host of other factors color how we interpret things, and sometimes it colors it negatively. So this is another reason that we might interpret something negatively, is because of all these different reasons. And an example might be someone comes home late and you start thinking, okay, why are they coming home late? What did they do, or what were they doing, right? And when maybe they were just, messing around at work and talking to somebody on the side or something, and they just lost track of time, or maybe they got stuck in traffic. So it could be a lot of reasons, but one might negatively interpret that depending on where they are. Okay, so are there some things that maybe you commonly interpret negatively? Why is this one so easy for us to fall into? What are some of the reasons? What are some other reasons that people might negatively interpret another's actions? I mean, I'm sure I haven't covered all of them. So if you have some thoughts, go ahead and leave those here. A fourth reason that people argue, a fourth common reason that people argue, is what we call triggers. Another name for this might be buttons. Now, these are, or can be, specific words or behaviors that solicit a particular response from us. That is, someone could do something or say something or do something in a certain way, and we automatically respond, right? So that's what we call a trigger. That's when they pull that trigger, we respond. When they push the button, we respond. This may also be people, events, or situations. As if we're around certain people, we respond in a certain way, or if we're in a certain situation, we might respond a certain way. One example that I like to use is if someone just talks loud, or they're very excitable, right? Maybe they're not angry at you, maybe that's just the way they talk, but the way that you receive it is that they're angry at you, so it's a trigger for you. So whenever they raise their voice, it causes you to feel a certain way. It's almost uncontrollable. Now, we can control it, but so they raise their voice and you become defensive, or you start feeling kind of like, okay, I need to get away from this person. And it's like an automatic response. So that's an example of a trigger. Another example of how we might respond is if someone raises their voice, we might raise our voice back. Or if someone does this, we might respond back by arguing with them. So triggers or buttons. A person pushes your buttons, they know what your buttons are, or even if they don't and they push them, your automatic response might be to get into an argument. Does this make sense? What are some of your triggers? What pushes your buttons? And are you aware of what pushes your buttons? Give an example of something that you hate, something that just gets a negative response from you. Are you aware of it? And do you feel like you can do something about that? What I'm going to do now is a brief review of the four most common reasons that people argue. The first one was habit, that we simply have developed a pattern of communicating that's negative and that's destructive. That is, we argue most of the time. So we've developed this habit of communication. Second, unresolved issues, things that either haven't been resolved in that relationship or things that you or your partner have brought forth. And we all have baggage, right? But things that we've brought forth from our childhood or previous relationship, and it's affecting how we communicate in our current relationship, or it's affecting our attitude, right? Maybe we're just angry and frustrated all the time, so it's affecting us in that way. A third reason is negative interpretation. That's taking things the wrong way. And this may be as a result of self-esteem issues or things that have happened in the past, and so we're projecting that onto the current person, right? So negative interpretation. And then the fourth one is triggers or buttons. Someone says something or does something that triggers us into an argument. Now, if you notice, what I've done to help you remember these four most common reasons is I've used what we call an acrostic. You might know it as an acronym. If you look at the letters in red, it spells hunt. So when we think about hunt, think about going after someone, right? So you think about an argument or going after that person. Person goes on the defense, and then they go on the offense, and then we're in a big fight and a big argument. So you think about hunt, it can help you remember the four most common reasons people argue. Habit, unresolved issues, negative interpretation, and triggers. Now remember, these are some of the underlying issues. On top of that could be things like finances, the kids, keeping the house clean, taking care of the kids, or some previous relationship. All of these things are on the surface, but when we go down beneath, we can see some of these underlying issues, which include what? Habit, unresolved issues, negative interpretation, and triggers. Now, what I do in the stop sign approach is I actually give you 4 very specific techniques or strategies or approaches that you can use to literally stop arguments dead in their tracks. All right? So I want to thank you for sticking with me here through this mini course, and I look forward to seeing you in the stop sign approach.